We're now going to look at some later Greek and Roman thinkers. And we're going to start with Aristotle, who obviously has played a huge role in many scientific disciplines. He was a strong advocate of direct observation and description of animals, and he himself observed and wrote about more than 500 species, which is just incredible. And among those descriptions are observations of animal behavior. He was also an advocate of evolutionary continuity, according to which human and non-human organisms are only quantitatively or measurably different, not qualitatively different. And so this is sort of like the beginning of a debate that we'll be looking at a little bit later on in this segment. He was a strong advocate of what's come to be known as vitalism, sort of the beginning of the nature-nurture controversy, because he felt that we are more or less governed by some kind of an inborn soul. And so nowadays it would be the inborn genes that are governing our behavior for those who are genetic determinists. So the beginning of the nature-nurture issue. But he also classified animals. Now, of course, most animals have been reclassified by other people, most notably Carl Linnaeus, but still, some of Aristotle's classification scheme has lived on to this very day. For example, Coleoptera was one of his classification terms, and those are the beetles and weevils. Another one of his terms was the Diptera, flies. So some of that has had a long-lasting impact. He also gave us what's known as the Scala Naturae, roughly translated as the great chain of being. And this relates directly to his concept of continuity. So there we go. For 3 million years, the human race has been at the top of the evolutionary ladder. So the point is, they're on that ladder. They're not off by themselves, which is a continuity position, the fact that we're on the same ladder. And of course, he placed us at the top, which was not an unusual thing to do. So basically, and there's another sketch that basically shows the same thing. So basically, from his standpoint, the lowest creatures were the sponges and other formless creatures. Now, of course, there were no microscopes, so he didn't know about single-celled organisms. So he was looking at things like sponges as the lowest animal life form. And then next up on this basic ordering were the insects, followed by the fish, the amphibians and the reptiles, followed by birds and mammals. But we occupy a special position. We're at the top, but we are still on the same great chain of being, the same Scala Naturae, this continuity position, as opposed to, as we'll see a little bit later, discontinuity.
When you come to think of it, almost all human behavior and activity is not essentially any different from animal behavior. The most advanced technologies and craftsmanship bring us, at best, up to the super chimpanzee level. Actually, the gap between, say, Plato or Nietzsche and the average human is greater than the gap between that chimpanzee and the average human.
So again, a good way of viewing the continuity position of Aristotle. Okay, next figure is Ptolemy II. And Ptolemy II actually collected and exhibited exotic animals, so obviously he is probably the originator of the zoo, the modern zoological park. So that was kind of cool. And then moving forward in time with later Greek and Roman thinkers, the Greeks were now starting to engage in a lot of philosophical speculation, and the Romans borrowed whatever natural history they had from the Greeks, and of course the Greeks weren't doing all that much with natural history around this time. So the interest in natural history, and of course animal behavior would be part of that, began to decline a bit. Stoicism was a point of view that kind of got things going again a little bit. It took some time, but the originator of the Stoic philosophy is a guy named, and there he is right there, Zeno. So, according to the Stoics, virtue means moral excellence. It's the highest possible quality that an organism can have, but it's something that's characteristic only of humans. Non-human organisms are not virtuous. In other words, he meant that we are free from passion, we are indifferent to pain and pleasure. This is basically what Stoicism is all about. I mean, if you've ever heard the term Stoic in its modern usage, basically it's that. If you type it into a dictionary, as I've done there, a person who can endure pain or hardship without showing their feelings or complaining. So that is Stoicism, sort of originating with Zeno. And so this is sort of the beginning of what has come to be known as the man-brute dichotomy. In other words, this is the discontinuity side of the coin. Remember, Aristotle was continuity. Well, this is evolutionary discontinuity, where humans are qualitatively different from non-human organisms. Pliny the Elder was pretty amazing. He wrote a series of books called Natural History. It's the first encyclopedia that we are aware of. It had 37 volumes with over 20,000 entries. Oh my gosh. He brought forth the Aristotelian view of continuity, but he, sort of to the absurd. I mean, some of the passages he wrote about were just absolutely ridiculous in terms of the kind of human-like qualities he would give to non-human animals, or even combinations of the two in some cases. It was really, really weird. It was also very anecdotal, but you know, it fostered interest in natural history, given that it had somewhat declined around that time. So this was actually a pretty good contribution. These are from Pliny's books. He talked about dog-headed people, so sort of combining dogs and humans. This is what I mean by, anecdotes, just absurdities that are found throughout his writings, or these, as he put it, sunscreen-footed people. And there's other things like that in there, so I'm not going to waste any more time with that. But nonetheless, played a role in sort of getting people interested in natural history once again. The early and Middle Ages. And the reason I play that particular song is that there's an awful lot going on in the Middle and Early Ages. It was not among the best periods of history, but religion was dominant at this particular point in time. I mean, the church dominated a lot of thinking, and as a result of that, the rise of Christianity caused a decline in natural science. The theologians were advocating strongly the man-brute dichotomy. It was always humans versus animals, not humans as a non-human, as a non-animal. Put it that way, because we are all animals. It was always one or the other, just the opposite of a continuity position. But there was a bit of a revival of Aristotle on the horizon, and that was very good to see. And it came about by actually two theologians, Albertus Magnus and St. Thomas Aquinas, who carried through the discontinuity position of the man-brute dichotomy. However, they said that humans are governed by free will. Animals, they said, are governed by instincts. Well, actually, this started to foster an additional interest in studying animals as long as we kept them totally separate from humans. And the church authorities, and it was good that they were church authorities themselves, but the church in general was starting to accept the legitimacy of, okay, natural history has its place, it's okay to study animals, just don't confuse them with us. So that basically is what was going on in this period of time.